What's up, guys?
What's
Welcome.
going on?
What's up? So welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. We are live again today on all your favorite social media platforms and YouTube to talk about the Nantucket Public School District, Atlantic General Hospital, and we're going to jump into some discussions about the Hive ransomware group takedown by the FBI, and then we also have another update on GitHub that we want to jump into. Unfortunately, we are missing Ryan today, so the three of us are going to carry the show, hopefully, and bring you the goods. And then the goods are Reg, Andre. What do we charge for the show?
The show, there is no charge. It is free. All we ask is that you please like, share, tell any executives in your company about our podcast. If you hear anything interesting, share. We do this at no charge, no sponsors, just all from the goodness of our heart to make this world a better place.
Yeah, you guys do a good job at helping us grow the show. And just keep doing what you're doing. Share it out, and we'll continue to dig up cybersecurity information that nobody else is talking about to help you understand what on earth is going on out there. And we have a bunch of ransomware attacks this week. What do you know? So it was announced today that the Nantucket public schools are closed following a ransomware attack, and they were closed early on Tuesday, January 31st, as an online ransomware attack overtook the entire island's public school internet system, according to an email sent Tuesday morning from Nantucket school superintendent obtained by Mass Live, which is where I'm reading this from, masslive.com. The Nantucket superintendent, Elizabeth Hallett, wrote in the message earlier this morning, we discovered that the Nantucket public school computer systems were compromised by ransomware. All student and staff devices have been shut down, and our safety and security systems, including phones and security cameras, were also disabled. For that reason, students and staff will be dismissed today at 12 p.m., with the exception of athletic events, which are still scheduled as usual. No school-issued devices should be used at home until further notice, as it could compromise home networks. We will provide any and all updates as they become available. Hallett did not provide other information in regards to the situation, and the Nantucket Public Police Department did not immediately respond to Mass Live's request for comment. And then this is on the heels of the Swansea Public Schools up in Massachusetts getting hit with a ransomware attack earlier in the month on January 3rd. Here we go again, guys. We love to talk about K through 12 schools are constantly getting hit with ransomware. And here we have another school getting hit with ransomware on the heels of a CISA and FBI report that came out, I think, Thursday or Friday of last week, guiding schools on how they should start protecting themselves. And one of the things that that report highlighted that I talked about on my YouTube channel is the fact that the schools are lacking funding to take care of this problem. And here we go. I mean, we're on the heels of 3 or 4 months after the LA County School District. We covered that on this show. We talked about all of the data sets that are going to be released by cyber criminals as a result of that. And it's kind of like, here we go again. So for the sake of not repeating myself from when we talked about it before, when we talk about how we're going to pay for this, where do we start here with helping schools? I mean, they got to understand that this is a problem for them. So awareness can't be the issue, right? So are we back to kind of that thing I brought up before where these superintendents and these principals and these leaders think that they have good cybersecurity and they're finding out very quickly that they don't?
I was going to say we need to start tying federal dollars to compliance. If you guys remember Baltimore, it was a big thing, Baltimore school system a couple of years ago, and it was like $10 million that it cost them to recover. So, going back to what you were saying, Brian, about, resources, definitely it's resources. We know there's shortages for cybersecurity professionals, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of kids, students, social security numbers out there now. Well, we don't know the details yet, but more than likely that's what they're looking for. So I think that is something that one way to try to get these school districts and superintendents to take this seriously is by having, like, look, you're going to get federal dollars. This is what you need to do. Now, granted, the federal government isn't doing some of these things, but it's, start of a conversation.
Well, there was the bill, we talked about it, that was passed last year. I think it was $1 trillion or something, several $1 trillion infrastructure bill. 800 million was to go to the states to distribute as cybersecurity funding for city and public institutions. Well, we've been following that in our state. And in our state, those funds, you can't even start applying for them until September of 2023. And I would assume, Texas is not at the end of the list on hardly anything. I would assume that probably at least half the states are not even where they can give the funds out yet, because they're still setting it all up. And, there's a lot of inefficiencies in government sometimes. And, I'm not sure how the school district's going to come up with this. I did kind of laugh that school's canceled, but athletics will go on. Like, what the heck? But anyway, this is you're right about the funding. There needs to be funding. If we could somehow tie funding to compliance. And then I wanted to make a comment. If we're ready to move off of that, I can have another comment I want to make. If we're not, let's stick on that little topic for a little bit, and then I'll make a comment here in a minute. I'm sure it looks like Brian wants to talk about this little topic here for a second.
You mean this particular, like the school, or?
Well, yeah, I just had a comment about this particular attack.
Yeah, I mean, number one, I think what's interesting about the attack is the statement where they told the kids don't plug in like your Chromebook at home, because your computer at home could cause your home network to get infected. I would assume they don't have Chromebooks. I would assume that they have, Windows-based computers, if that's the concern. But yeah, I mean, that's a new one we've seen in a school's release, is like, hey, don't turn your computer on, keep it off, because you could be impacted if it just sounds to me like they have no idea how they got in, and they're taking every precaution. They took everything down, including the security cameras. They don't even know if the security cameras were the cause.
Like, turn off the Hive Vision cameras, unplug them now.
Yeah. Our camera guy said, don't worry about those. So what that makes me think of is, when they start mentioning cameras and devices going home, like, first off, those kids ought to be, at the minimum, they ought to be in Chromebooks. Or if they do like Windows S mode or something where they're locked down, where the kids aren't able to add stuff, malware, maybe less likely to get on there. But what this shows, the depth that they're involved, like the cameras, all this and that. This wasn't yesterday somebody clicked on some email and then, and then they got in the system, and then today we have ransomware. Most likely this was 3 to 6 months ago, or even longer. The bad actor, if you will, or the organization that got into this school district, and man, they've been going through, checking all their boxes, gathering information, leaking out the data, most likely, of all the kids, going through and getting backdoors into all of the systems. They can't just do that all at once. They got to go on a little fishing expedition, and they got to go build backdoors or get backdoors into everything, which, we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we talk about GitHub. But they look for the backdoors, they get involved, and then boom, when they're ready, they pull the trigger and everything's locked down. Everything has got the little ransomware sign on it. So bottom line is, man, these things don't happen right now. This thing started, 3 to 6 months ago. We don't know the exact timeline. It'll come out later on in the investigation, because this is just early on. This is all we know right now.
Right. So to add to that, we're going to talk about a ransomware group and at the end of the show that had the FBI in their network for a really long time. And I think that's a big signal here to where we're at with all businesses, including cyber criminal businesses, is that our ability to detect things is not where it needs to be. And, there's something to be said for that because the technology's there. Maybe that's the awareness problem, is that we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. So we assess our, going back to what I was saying earlier, do school administrators have this false sense of security because they're doing, MFA, and they do, maybe they do password management and they do some security and awareness training. They have those things in place and they think, oh, well, we have good cybersecurity because we're doing those things. And that's just not enough, as the three of us know. Is that where we're at, you think? Is that the reality? Like, you guys, we know that you need to be looking at your network from the standpoint of, are things changing, or is there activity happening at a certain period of time when it shouldn't? There's different things and different ways you can set up traps or honeypots to catch people on your network that shouldn't be there when, or not. And is that kind of where we're at, do you guys think, or do you think it's worse than that? And by worse, I mean.
So I just thought, I heard Ryan's voice in my head, so I know he's not here, but I think Ryan would say, it's not a matter of you know what you know or you don't know what you know. And I think he would end it with, and then you stick your head in the sand, because there's a high probability that they knew. We don't know that yet, but there's a high probability that they knew. And maybe they were just hoping, looking the other way, putting their head in the sand. So little shout out to Ryan, because he always calls that out. And we don't know if that happened here or not, but, yeah, this is it sounds like they had no idea that it was coming.
But in the same sense, do you think that these administrators are aware of technology that can tell you, like, hey, there's somebody in your network, or there's some things happening on your network that are somewhat suspicious, and you might want to have somebody take a look as to what's going on here? Do you think that they have that awareness, or do you think that we're not there yet?
I think they're doing everything in-house still, and they're not getting, they're in their own little bubble.
Right.
They graduated from school 20 years ago. They know what they're doing with servers, emails, and things like that, but they're not in the cyber realm. They just think because they have some type of protections, a little DNS protection and things like that, but it's a new world. And
I've ran into, I think, 3 or 4 executives who went to like their annual, this was like in the past 6 or 8 months, they went to their like annual meeting that's kind of, required or expected in their industry. And all of them came back and said, when I asked them, they said that they had mentioned cybersecurity. Like, we talked to a realtor, they had talked about cybersecurity. We talked to a CPA, had just come back from one. They'd mentioned the FTC safeguards rule. So I can't imagine that when they go to their yearly conferences, so you're going to have conferences that like the principal gets to go to, and some of the head people at the school, maybe they pick a few teachers. I can't imagine at these conferences they're not talking about cybersecurity at all. So you're right. They probably do have their head in, well, not have their head in the sand, but maybe they've been in their own little bubble, and maybe their IT person or IT department director or whatever they have at the school district, maybe they weren't invited onto these things. Maybe they came back and said, hey, Francis, we need to get more secure. And she's like, I got it under control, and she doesn't really know because she's been in a bubble for 20 years. You know what I mean? So there's no way to tell at this point.
So the answer to that, if you're a leader, in my opinion, is don't trust your IT person. Get an independent third party to verify that you are actually secure. And that's the only way you do it. No matter who your relationship is, if you work with an outside company, if you work with your own internal IT staff, you should be having a third party come in and do an independent assessment of your cybersecurity do a cybersecurity risk assessment just to make sure that what you think is actually happening is actually happening. That's the simple way to put it.
Yep.
So moving right along, we have another hospital, another piece of critical infrastructure here in the United States, as defined by the U.S. government. Atlantic General Hospital in Maryland is experiencing what is being called a ransomware event. It started Monday afternoon, and a hospital spokesperson told 47 ABC that the cause of the disruption is being investigated. Network outages did occur, but we're told that patient interruption was limited. The hospital emergency room is continuing to receive and treat patients and will continue to service elective surgeries and other outpatient procedures. Atlantic General Health Systems offices remain open and all services are operational with the exception of ReadyScripts, the hospital outpatient walk-in lab, and a pulmonary function testing and outpatient imaging. Typical minimizing the event type of stuff that we're dealing with here, guys. Is that what we're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking. Thinking legacy hardware, legacy software, and you know.
Yeah, it looks like this is kind of like a remote area of Maryland. So I would imagine it's probably not a massively busy hospital. But it sounds like they're kind of moving along. I got another article here from the Maryland Coast Dispatch where it's basically saying the same thing. But, I only found 2 articles, and they were both very remote, local Maryland TV station and news station, and they're not talking about this anywhere else. Don't want to wreck the FBI's, heyday with taking down Hive, I guess. I don't know what that's here. I mean, on Thursday you're celebrating the Super Bowl by taking down Hive, and then here we go on Tuesday, and you have Atlantic General Hospital down. And I'm not saying it was Hive ransomware, but these ransomware groups, I would imagine, work very closely together in a lot of cases. And if you got your sights set on a hospital, why wouldn't you pull the trigger on Monday so you can kind of rub it back into the face of the FBI? Because the FBI is getting involved in this.
Yeah.
So, and we did talk about last week, guys, one of the things that I want to cover when we talk about the Hive ransomware next, but we did talk about last week the fact that ransomware payments went down a little bit. And I want to kind of mention why that could be when we talk about Hive, but not a lot to talk about here with Atlantic Hospital other than we have another hospital that's kind of limping along here. I knew about this yesterday, but I couldn't find any articles on it that this event had happened. So I didn't go out publicly with it. But now that we have it, we're not getting much information. And unfortunately, I think over the next couple of days, we're going to learn a lot more. What do you think, Ryan?
I think we lost Andre.
We did. We definitely did.
Well, so the difference between this one, which just came out, and the school, which just came out, is it looks like in this particular case, some services are still working, which makes me hopeful that they have some kind of segmentation in place. We don't know if, is this just like, hey, all the systems were hurt, but, like their portal is online, so they broke out some Chromebooks and kept working, or something, or was there segmentation in place? So it makes me a little hopeful that maybe they had a little more in place and the blast radius was limited, but I don't know.
I'm going the complete opposite. I'm going to say that they don't even understand the breadth and depth of what's happening to them right now, and they're figuring this process out now. They're getting a very quick education on incident response and disaster recovery planning, and hopefully, to your point, a lot of these machines that you don't need to have a ventilator on a network to make it work, right? A lot of this stuff can be still used in the hospital to keep patient care up, but you're not recording it. You're doing everything on paper, and this is just going to be a major struggle for hospitals on the back end to get the information that they're not able to put into the system now into the system after the fact. So really, it'll be a testament of their business continuity plan, to see if they can easily move to paper, like we've seen other hospitals move to paper during these types of events. So, Andre, anything you want to add to this? Not a whole lot here, but when you were gone, we were talking about potentially, this is probably going to lead to something along the lines of finding out in a week or so that this was a lot worse than what we know today.
No, yeah, same thing. This IT director is probably telling the CEO and the directors, yeah, everything's under control. And then this weekend, everything's going to be down and it's going to be an oh crap moment.
Yeah, either that or they're just going to find out that these guys were in there for a very long time and they stole a bunch of stuff before they revealed themselves, so to speak.
It's why we're seeing in the newer legislation, so like FTC safeguards rule, we're seeing that there has to be written procedures that have to be followed on a timeline prescribed by law, and the reports have to be given to the C-level people that matter. Because we've seen over and over and over and over in these reports that in these attacks where people had information, it was kept from C-level, or C-level kind of turned the other way, stuck their head in the sand because they didn't want to do anything. So, they actively ignored it or whatever, somewhere along that spectrum. But, we're seeing that in legislation. So, whatever's going on in these last two instances, the law is trying to push people into, better reporting. You can't say, oh, Chuck in a truck's got it. I literally talked to a CPA in the last week, and they literally said, our guys got it covered. That doesn't count. You got it. Like for the FTC safeguards rule, that specifically applies to CPAs. That doesn't count. You can't just say our guys got it covered. It's got to be a written plan. Anyway, I'm fixing to get started here, so I'm going to let you move on to the next one or whatever you need to do.
Fixing to get covered. So why don't we just roll right into it, since we will be talking about this ransomware event in next week's show with an update, I'm sure. Right before this happened, on Thursday, whatever day it was last week, Tuesday, Thursday, the FBI came out with the Justice Department, guns ablazing, and had a nice big press conference with the pretty backdrop and announced that they took down the Hive Ransomware Group. And not only did they announce that they took down the Hive Ransomware Group, but they also decided to boast and tell everybody that we were in their network for like 6 months. And while we were in there, we were able to get the recovery keys to businesses, and we were able to save businesses to the tune of $130 million in ransomware payments, which is right around the same number that we talked about last week on the show when we said ransomware payments have gone down. Mm-hmm. Right around 130 some million dollars. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, we're kind of talking in the show last time about, potentially the beginning of the end for ransomware was one guy's kind of take on things. And we kind of blew that out of the water. And now we have this information where basically the FBI was getting the keys for businesses. And that's what, this article that we were looking at on CNN kind of talks about is, they've been trying for years, law enforcement, to battle ransomware. And this is maybe the new tactic that they're going to use, which is we're just going to try to get into the network of the cyber criminals. And if we do, we're going to get the keys, and we're going to give the keys to businesses so they can unlock their files. I don't know if that's a great strategy. What do you guys think? I mean, that's kind of what's being proposed here.
The problem with that is once you get the keys and they find out you're in, now what happens? You can't catch the criminal, right? So for me, I know right now what's been happening doesn't seem to be working, but I say you run the full investigation so that you can catch them in the act and you have everything you need. Because if you go in, they find out you're in and they scram, all they're going to just do is wash and repeat and do it again, a different way or different server or different location or whatever the case is. But at the same time, if I'm a business owner and I don't have the $5 million or $300,000 to pay to get my data back, and I'm in the U.S., I want my government to help me in any way possible so that my business doesn't get disrupted or even go bankrupt. So I could see both sides, but at one side, maybe they should have been doing a little better. Maybe that business owner should have been doing a little better on his network. So it's an interesting conversation on that.
I agree, and you have to look at it from the standpoint of, well, maybe not quite war, but like a battle, because really this news conference, there's a little bit of psyop, psychological operations going on, okay? Because with all the fanfare and all that stuff, that catches attention of the people, hopefully strikes fear into some of the bad actors' hearts, if you will. Also, this is kind of a new-ish strategy. We talked about a year ago how they were pushing for legislation and for rules to allow them to fight back, because we all know on this show, we all know that if they're in our systems, the bad guys' systems are vulnerable. And so if they're in our systems, that gives us the opportunity to get into their systems. And, they've been pushing for the ability to fight back, because that is kind of it kind of shows the armpit, if you will, or a little more vulnerable part of the organization where you can fight back. So, crazy other thing about this, all this press conference and all this, brouhaha, if you will, not a single arrest. Nope. They're in the system. So most likely they're on the computers of all the people that are involved in that organization. They can probably follow them around. They probably know where they are. And Hive, aren't they based out of Russia? Am I correct? I don't remember where they were based from. But they may not be able to arrest somebody in another country, especially if it's Russia.
And that could have been what they were thinking. Look, we're never going to be able to arrest these guys, so let's just shut it down and let's expose them. We know they're going to try to start again, but at least we save X amount of businesses from going bankrupt.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of a weird. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So this was 100% a message to other Russian cyber criminals, in my opinion, because the screenshot that I'm just showing on the screen now is written in Russian, and that's what they put on the website. So that their audience is 100% other Russian cyber criminals saying, "Here, look at what we did," and this is something that I mentioned in my YouTube video when I talked about it on my channel, and basically the thing of it is these guys, like, the timing of them coming out now, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Like they're coming out now and they're putting notice to everybody else. And I think the hope is that they kind of hope that these criminals now take stock of their own cybersecurity, knowing that these people and potentially other cybersecurity researchers who go on the offensive, they do exist, are potentially getting into these networks of these cyber criminals, which is something that businesses have had to deal with for 3 or 4 years now. So this is an attempt to turn the tables on who needs to be investing in their cybersecurity. And I don't know if it's going to work. Like I'm not convinced that these guys can spin things up and can move around so quickly. And I don't think a regular business has that luxury.
Are you talking about oh, sorry. Yeah. Are you talking about the cyber criminals ability?
I'm talking about like cyber criminals can like businesses are almost built on trust, right? And a physical location. People want to see that you exist somewhere. You're not some fly by night company that only has a website and there's no physical address. And when you're talking about things like SEO, you know this, Randy, changing IPs and moving web servers is not ideal for that situation, right? If you want to, have a business that gets found by search engines and things like that. And I think that those types of things come into play here for cyber criminals because they don't have those worries. Like they can just go set up servers and spin things up elsewhere. And then it's on law enforcement and other security researchers to figure out where these things exist and map that all together. So I just think like you're almost pouring fire on the cat and mouse game, in my opinion here. Like,
except you have to access all that infrastructure from a device. And so I'm wondering if the FBI was able to get into, the MacBooks or the Windows laptops or the Chromebooks or whatever they're using to get the infrastructure set up.
Yeah, they'll wipe
what I mean? What's that?
They'll wipe all that stuff now.
Well, I know you get into the BIOS and put you a little foothold into the BIOS.
Maybe they're that good, but I don't believe it.
I've seen it happen before. So, I mean, I don't know, but we'll see. But hopefully, right?
It's going to be just like the drug trade, right? For every one big guy they get out, you're going to have 5 lieutenants that now just say, I'm going on my own.
So, so I would agree with Bryan based on what Andre just said. Yeah, you're definitely right for there.
So let's cover some of the things.
Creates more opportunity, basically.
So you're making the problem worse.
Yeah. Well, not really. Eventually you run out of bad guys, but
That was my point. So let's talk about
good point.
Here's the seven things that this Hive Ransomware group has done. I found this and I thought this was interesting, so I wanted to bring it up. They were responsible for hacking the Costa Rican Public Health Agency. They were responsible for crippling Europe's largest tech retailer. They hacked an Ohio healthcare system. They hacked one of Indonesia's largest gas suppliers. They hacked Central Bank of Zambia. They zapped an entire town in Spain, and they stole data on 270,000 people from a Louisiana healthcare system. And that's just some of the stuff that they've done. But that was basically their top 7. Very prolific group, hit a lot of people, tried to make a lot of money along the way, but it seems like law enforcement got onto them. And then at what point do these geniuses say to themselves, well, why are so many people not paying us? That would have been thing 1 for me. Like, you got to know your numbers, right, in business. And if your ransomware payments have dropped off significantly, you might want to start taking a look at why that happened. But
you might want to do a malware bite scan or something on your network.
On combo fix.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a saying that we've been talking about now that, it's not that you're not going to get hacked. You're just too small to make the news. And the list, Bryan, that you just listed are, countries and big government organizations. So if you're someone reading this article is thinking, oh, yeah, FBI is looking out for us and stuff and like that. And no, you're still small potatoes. You're still going to get ransomware attack. They're just they're going after the big ones that's causing, issues that, are affecting the economy and things like that, not your small business.
Yeah. Unless you live in that podunk area of Maryland, you're not even going to hear about that hospital being attacked. Or you listen to this show or get it from some other cybersecurity person that's covering this stuff. And chances are, if you don't live anywhere in the New England area, you're not going to realize that the Nantucket School District is under a ransomware attack today. If you're out in California, why would you care, right? Most people don't. And it's not going to make the national news, as Andre rightfully said. And your business is going to be the same way. Nobody's going to care your business is, or at least in the eyes of the news corporations, nobody's going to care that your little business got hit by ransomware. So nobody's ever going to hear about it. And the interesting thing in the article for the CNN that I saw towards the end, the FBI cites that they're aware that it's a problem that businesses don't come forward when they get hit with ransomware. And his thought process that this FBI agent kind of said in the article was around the fact that, businesses are fearful that, the FBI is going to come in with guns blazing and take all your computers and servers and make your business inoperable if they reach out to the FBI in a ransomware attack. And they're trying to convey the message that that's not exactly how it happens or what happens when they get involved. And in a lot of cases, they're very helpful, and businesses should be aware of that. But I think that's a very narrow-minded, because he's an FBI agent, because he's involved with the FBI. I think that's a very narrow-minded view of what's actually happening out there. And I wanted to bring this up for discussion because I don't even think that businesses tell guys like us that they've been attacked. And even people in your own company might not even know that you've been attacked. That's how far they try to brush this under the rug in a lot of businesses, because it's one of those crimes where the victim gets shamed, right? In a lot of ways. Oh, how could you let this happen? How could, as a CEO, how could you be so stupid? And not only that, CEOs know they're going to be held responsible if this gets out or something bad happens. And they don't want that either from their board, from their own management, from whoever's potentially in charge of hiring and firing that CEO in that organization. If they find out about this stuff, it could be trouble. So I thought that was just an interesting little tidbit towards the end. I just don't think that the fear with most business people lies with the FBI coming in and taking their servers. I really think it has to do with job security and whether if this gets out, they're going to lose their job.
I would say there's definitely that's on the play. And then also most businesses are living from paycheck to paycheck, if you will. And so any kind of interruption in their business is seen as potentially life-threatening. And if they can just get over it and move on and get back to work, they're going to do that as well. And, like the guy said, and the quote you read, people think the FBI is going to come in and take all their servers and everything and all that. And yeah, I think people think that. I think he's right on the money there, which, as a side note, might be a good idea to find an FBI agent in the nearest big town next to you who's involved in cybersecurity. Take them out to lunch or something and just get them in your Rolodex, if you will. So if something never does happen, you've got somebody you can reach out to on the inside over there who can help you with the process. Because probably the way you contact the FBI about this today is probably going to be different, a month down the road or 6 months down the road. So anyway.
Cool. All right, Randy. So we're going to wrap up the show with our final topic, and I'm going to kind of let you take the reins with this one because you do a good job of breaking things down to a human level. This is kind of technical.
Yeah.
But from a standpoint of cybersecurity, there's a couple problems here. A, GitHub is a problem. B, signed certificates, forged certificates are a problem. And they're a bigger problem than what most people realize. But why should the average, computer user employee care about this?
What is GitHub too, if you want to mention that?
So GitHub's a place where you can basically store code and then use, as you're updating code, roll out different versions and stuff like that. Tons of companies use it. Microsoft owns it. And, there's so much involved here with that. But basically what's happened here is they were able to get the certificate's like a passport. So you download your software that you use. It has a little, certificate. It's like a passport. It basically allows it to work with that computer. And it says, hey, I'm from this developer. I work with this computer. So by them stealing those certificates for several different versions of GitHub software, two disturbing things come out. One, if they can put that into their bag of tricks. So they're going around. Remember, we mentioned back at the beginning of the show, we talked about the school district that was hit. They've probably been in there 3 to 6 months. Well, once they first get in, they go into their bag of tricks and they say, hey, what kind of vulnerabilities can we find? And so if they go into a company like Microsoft who uses GitHub, they might have a version of GitHub on their computer, and they could secretly roll out their own little like doctored version, and it would pass under the radar of, something like a process blocker or something like that. So they can use it in their bag of tricks to, later get a foothold once they're in a network. So it's kind of disturbing from that perspective because GitHub is used to develop software. Software runs the world, which is kind of the other thing I was going to say. It's disturbing just because it's GitHub and a lot of people use GitHub and, it's used for software and software runs the world. I know it's repeating myself, but, so it's disturbing for those two reasons, like the big current, all the rage right now is ChatGPT. Well, OpenAI has a lot of funding coming from Microsoft. We don't know what kind of, interaction they have. Microsoft owns GitHub. Is any of ChatGPT's code in GitHub? Like, could they theoretically get on to one of the programmers and use that as a potential backdoor to put code into GPT? The answer is yeah. I mean, it's far-fetched, but yeah, it could happen. That's why this is valuable and why it's important, my opinion. I don't know if I broke it down into everyday language or not, though. So I guess that's GitHub, right? So we got, and GitHub is a concern because I don't think when GitHub was built, security was not where it is today, right? And software developers have become accustomed to using this. I mean, most programming software where you actually write the code worth a lick of salt integrates right in with GitHub, and you can basically push your code right up to it from that software, and it's made it very easy. And that's what a lot of software developers I know like to use. You can make things private. You can put controls on things like you would expect. Most people do, especially if it's not open source type of information. But the concern is that they get in through the back end, right? And they get access to this information. It's supposedly secure and encrypted. And, all those things can be broken down and broken into. So that's, high level, the issue with GitHub. Now, when it comes to code signing certificates, Randy, where does the issue, I guess the end user basically is, from what you're saying, if this happens to them, there's really nothing they can do. Well, yeah. So, so first off, we don't know the extent they got into the systems of GitHub and they were able to pull out these certificates. Who knows what else they did? But let's say that, they upload this somewhere on the dark web. Hey, put this in your bag of tricks. And maybe it could be that they're in the systems as we speak of some developers around the world. Maybe they're targeting some specific software. And so they pulled, one of these things are, it's GitHub for desktop for Macs. Maybe they're targeting some specific software, but that's why it matters, because if they're already into the system, they can use this as a backdoor to be able to use that certificate to push signed software onto that computer. And
they could also use it to push malicious code.
Yes.
Under the guise that this is this code signed, code.
That it's signed. Yes.
Right. And that's that's the bigger thing for me, is that you can push malicious code if you have a
under the radar
certificate under the radar of, Windows popping up and warning you that this could potentially be bad. And if they do it to the right programs that have the right level of access on your system already, that could fly right under your antivirus, things like that. And they don't even check for it because it's already like a trusted application.
Right.
So that's the bigger concern that I have when I see issues with code signing certificates. So, all right, guys, we're about at the 45-minute mark, which is good for me. If you guys are good, we will sign off. Remember, share our show, and we'll be back with Ryan next week. Take care, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode.
All right.
Bye, y'all.